Hey everyone, welcome back to the All Things Private Practice podcast. I'm joined today by Dr. Vinita Menon. She is a seasoned clinical psychologist, supervisor, and nationally certified school psychologist and professional coach. She has co-founded the Thrive Collective, a hybrid psychology practice that provides compassionate, evidence-based therapy and evaluations for children and adults. She also supports the ADHD and autistic community and is an EAP provider for executives at a multinational firm. Dr. Menon specializes in culturally sensitive support for Indian women navigating unique challenges. She co-founded the Thrive Mind to expand the reach of those services. So I've canceled on you like 4 times because of life, and I'm really just appreciative that you've been flexible. I'm really happy to have you on here. And anything I missed with your bio?
No, I think that's a great place to start. I'd love to jump into the conversation before my voice gives out.
Hard relate. So yeah, let's do it. So you pitched me on whatever Patrick thinks is best, which people always do. And I'm like, I don't fucking know. And then you talked about like autistic culture interwoven with just different cultures in general and how there are similarities, how there are differences, how we approach things differently here versus all over the world. You just got back from a very long trip to India. So like, you tell me where you want to jump in and start, where your brain feels like this is it.
That sounds great. I feel like my life has been working on 2 parallel paths. There's the professional world. I started off, as most of us do, as a generalist, immediately thinking I want to work with little kids until I did. And then, no, maybe not,
Yep. Because I get that. Totally get that. I was going to be a school counselor. And the reason was only because I wanted summers off. I do not like kids.
Well, tell me more directly how you feel about that. No.
Autism 101.
No, I'm also a school psychologist. So I'm a clinical and a school psychologist. And I went into the clinical world because I love the puzzle of the brain and how do things go together and what makes people tick, that kind of thing. And then I loved the school psychology aspect because bullying was trending early. ADHD was trending early in my career. And school teams did not have any idea at that point what to do.
Right.
And so I'm a proactive, preventative type of person at my core. And so the school psychology approach worked well with me. Parallel to that is a young girl growing up in the US, the only one of her kind for the longest time. I was the only non-white person until 8th grade. So so that was a long time of me trying to figure it out. My home life was very different. My parents are highly educated. They came here and established themselves, and really a classic immigrant success story. Made sure that I knew about my culture, but also were very open-minded about me trying things here. Like I went to a high school trip to France and, things like that. Like they'll let me try things and figure it out.
Sure.
So, they had a growth mindset before we knew what that was, or we knew what to call it. So I'm forever thankful, for that. So when you put those 2 aspects together, I have always felt like I was trying to crack the social code.
Right.
And then I turned it into a career. That's basically what happened. So when I went to India on family visits, I was the American cousin. I didn't know all the traditions and customs. Sure. I didn't know until someone told me, how, speak and don't speak until you're spoken to, or, whatever it was, not hard and fast, but just generally speaking.
Sure.
I wouldn't go answer the front door, but here I would, at home, right. Home in Chicago. So I've always been fascinated by that. And I think it's been a personal development. I was the baby who wasn't supposed to make it. I was born with a significant health issue, never before seen in my small town in India, and quite an anomaly. So given that, place where it started, my grandmother had to feed me with a little dropper because I couldn't suck as a baby, so I couldn't take a bottle, for example.
Right.
So she had to feed me with so my mom, a young parent, didn't know what to do.
Sure.
And my grandmother was like, watch me, and I think that's been the theme of my entire life. I think that has been, oh, you don't think you can do that? I don't think you can do that. And I end up saying, watch me, so I want to help so many other people. I have this platform, I have this opportunity, brain, skill set, whatever. I want other people to have the same chances. And if I can help them crack the code and release their potential. We call it different things now. We call it executive functioning skills, and we call it pragmatic language skills. And sure, I can talk the talk about, all of the jargon and fancy terms, but what we really want at our core for all of us is to feel connected, right? To see that,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I was just saying this the other day. I was saying this the other day, like, one, I'm glad you're not going to use the jargon. We don't want the jargon on this podcast. We want the relatable aspects of everything. So this is good. But like I was saying this the other day, I just got back from Ireland from a retreat. And then, throughout all of my traveling, people are people, right? Like we all want universal things for the most part, despite culture and despite where we grew up and how we grew up. I think we all want connection. We all want community. We all want to feel loved and supported and seen. And I think we lose sight of that oftentimes. And even what's happening right now in this country, like we lose sight of that very quickly. And it's fucking sad to me. But ultimately, I'm sorry to interrupt you on that. I just felt like that you wanted to talk about like travel and how culture plays a role. And I think it absolutely does. And traveling is such a good lesson in humanity too.
Oh, very well said. And I think, as a family, my husband and my daughters and I, we have always emphasized family trips and travel over gifts for birthdays, like, sweaters and, things like that. So we have enough sweaters, so we pool our money and do all kinds of trips, some pretty adventurous ones. And it has promoted such great conversations. And how would it have been possible for me to feel homesick about a country that I've never been to?
Sure.
I went to Singapore, for example, and I was waiting in line to check out because, of course, I had to buy some souvenirs. And there was a woman in a tank top and shorts, a woman fully covered in a burqa, a woman in a sari, a woman in jeans and a t-shirt, and me, I don't even remember what I was wearing. But I was looking around and like, and there was no one batted an eyelash. It was just really no big deal. People were just people. And I love the true melting pot and, that experience where you can just be who you are. And I craved that as a young child, right? And then fast forward later into my career, I see my clients who are craving that, to be understood and to be on the clinical practice and in the coaching business. That, like on the coaching side, someone will say, I have all the technical skills. I put an awesome slide deck together, and then I froze because they asked me a question on the spot and I couldn't answer it. And the company's culture or the client culture appreciates thinking on your feet more than a pre-rehearsed, sort of presentation.
Sure.
She lost the pitch because of that, or that's what she thinks anyway. But just one of many, examples of, we each have different things that are easy. And then I recently I don't like to do reels, but I did them myself a couple of times. And one was, I love to plan ahead. I like schedules and I like to know what's happening on any given day. That helps.
Speaking my love language.
Yeah, it actually helps me be more flexible, though. If to move something, we can, but I need to know where the spaces are, right?
For sure. Totally.
It works out. So when I was thinking about this trip to India, and I hadn't gone back in like 7 years, and an opportunity came up to work at a school and do some teacher training and some professional development. I jumped at that and then thought I could also see a little bit of family and some fun too. But it was really, I spent several days at the school, and the difference there was, there's so many strengths. For example, here in the US, you'd call me before you came over. You'd say, hey, I'm going to be in town from the 18th to the 27th. What day works for you?
Right.
If you went to a family member's house in India and you said, hey, I'm Benita's friend, they'd be like, come on in, have a meal. Do you want to stay over? Sure, no problem. And it would be like, and you don't have to call ahead. You just ring the doorbell, and there's a charm to that. I can't do that, but I do admire it,
Absolutely.
On the other side, those are the unique differences. But on the other side, I noticed that when I talked to people from little kids all the way, 70 plus. I talked to a wide range of people on this trip. And really the thing that keeps coming back, especially for women, is they really are trying to have it all, but not necessarily all at the same time. They're trying to figure out different pauses. One person has twins, adorable 3.5-year-old, very busy twins. And she never stopped her career. She's an associate partner for a large telecom company. She has a lot of family support, so she didn't stop her career. She kept going and managed. She's worried that did I make the right choice? Did I sacrifice anything?
Sure.
Then I spoke to another person who is at a 10-year pause to raise her family and is really nervous about going back to the workforce. Wants to, is very well trained, but is rusty, and did I make the right choice? Is it too late for me? Can I go back? Will they ask questions at the interview about what were you doing for the last 10 years?
Right.
Yes, they will ask, and you need to be ready for the answer.
Sure.
Talked about that informally. But these are the same questions that I'm getting in my coaching practice.
Absolutely.
And people who are either born and raised here, first gen, second gen, now I don't only see Indian women, but that seems to be a large portion of my caseload right now for the coaching side. And so I developed a set of modules and a program for that that is scientifically based. It speaks to the universality of our common needs and how to practically problem solve. And that's exactly what I do with my clinical caseload as well. So
yeah.
It has been such a privilege, and it's been such an interesting parallel path, as I said before, that, I don't want to be put in a box, and I don't think anyone else should either. That's just been my core belief. I always win at Two Truths and a Lie. I will win because, if you try to put me in a box, I'm going to crawl right out. So that's what I want to offer, to others too, either through this conversation or through, Instagram posts or conversations,
Yeah, no, I think it's important. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, feeling put in a box and being resilient and creative and thinking outside of that box and just trying to constantly prove whoever wrong, whether it be society, whether it be family, whether it be self, whether it be just circumstance. And I think that's what makes entrepreneurs in a lot of ways. And it's the humanity piece that gets missed oftentimes. Like we can really drop into like hustle grind culture and be like, just got to work harder and then things will get better. And it's like, well, that's not always true. And that's often not the case. There's a lot of context that we miss. But I think existentially what you're saying is, despite whether you're in India, despite whether you're here, despite whether you're talking to people throughout the world, people often have the same concerns, the same desires, and a lot of the same anxieties and stresses that are coming up for them. And I think I keep hearing like almost at a core foundational level of like, am I good enough? Do I measure up? Like, am I going to be able to make an impact? And I think those are big questions for people that I think we have constantly happening throughout our lifetime. So I like that approach. Now let's pivot to You mentioned really working with ADHDers and autistic people in general. And I think there's a lot of what we're talking about feeling like I don't fit in, I don't belong, I don't feel like I understand the rules that are happening in life in general. I feel like I'm in this box that doesn't work for me and I need to get out of it in some way or another. So tell me about why ADHD, autism are passions of yours.
I didn't go looking for it as major things in my life have come. It came to me. So when I was at a partial hospitalization program doing some training early on in my career, ADHD was only, and I put that in quotes,
Sure.
only present in a very young boy.
Yep.
There only one.
Young white boys for the most part, right?
Right. So, and I'm like, well, that didn't sit well with me, but then here we are. What do I know? I'm a trainee. So I watched that evolve, and I looked left and right and I'm like, well, what about the parents? Because sometimes when you're having conversations, they're like, I think I was like this as a kid, but we didn't call it that. I was just being a brat, or
Right.
I, mislabeled as like the naughty kid or something.
Sure.
Then I looked at the siblings and I thought, well, what about them?
Yep.
When all of this attention is going to the identified person in the family for care, and it was a medical model, so I will fall back into that sometimes. In my early career, it was hardcore, medical
Sure.
model.
Yep.
But that too didn't sit well. So I piloted some sibling programs. Later in my career, there was always, I did a lot of work in schools, a lot of in services, and the people who were being bullied and targeted had the same set of traits. They were different, a different drummer, that type, loner, keeps to himself or herself, mostly himself at that point.
Right.
And then I had the opportunity to work in a developmental disorders clinic, and I did a deep dive all day, every day, 5-6 times a week of these dually diagnosed individuals across the lifespan. And that it was a very deep and really enriching experience. 90% of my clients had both diagnoses, autism and ADHD.
Sure.
And the way that I was trained, it is their personality and their individuality first and diagnosis second. But we had to crack the code. We had to figure it out. So how do we go from here to there? And there are some things that I thought were so fundamental that I realized I needed to teach as part of a session. For example, I had many college students who were brilliant until they went to college and crashed and burned because they had to create their own structure. And that was extremely difficult for them. So I would take out my planner, paper planner. We would practice blocks of time and how to estimate time and all those good things. And one client stopped me and said, "You're not in college anymore." I said, no, I'm done with college. Well past that. And he's like, well, then why do you use a planner? And I was like, okay, this is interesting. Planners are for life, not just for school, And so that's when, in a clinical sense, we would say, okay, we need to generalize the skill, right? But that's what he was asking me. He's like, well, I'm thinking of it very specifically for my college classes and assignments and due dates and things like that. And then yes, that's where we will start, but we need to generalize the skill to your life in general, paying bills and coming to this appointment on time and rescheduling if you have to. How do you do that? Making a reservation, making travel plans, whatever it might be.
Totally.
So, and it blew his mind that I used a planner. And that was very early. It was a privilege to work with him. And then I realized that there were a lot of women and girls who I'm like, wow, here's a whole nother area that nobody's talking about. And my oldest diagnosis for the first time of an autistic born female, was at age 23. And that was 15 years ago. And that was very late then.
Highly unusual back then, for sure.
Yeah, very late diagnosis for her. But she was a classic presentation. I went through her report cards. She was always described as shy or difficulty with change. She was her sister's shadow. Her sister's friends were her friends, and so on. And every single example, had she been male, she would have been diagnosed a long time before. And I was like, I kept questioning myself at that point, and then I said, you know what? You wouldn't question this if this person was male or younger. So stop it. Like sometimes you doubt yourself, and so stop it right now. And the parents and the family, they were so relieved because she was failing her clinical program when she got to the practical side I think it was a physical therapy program. And she did great academically, theoretically, all of that coursework was done. And what did her team say about her? She's pedantic. She is aloof with the patients, doesn't meet them at the patient's level, the physical therapy patient, and talks like a professor. I mean, all of it. It was amazing. And so I asked one of her professors, like, well, what does she do before class? Like when everyone else was sort of settling in, chit chat. And like, oh, she just sits there and she doesn't talk to anybody. And I'm like, again, if she was male, she would have been identified
For sure.
so much earlier. And it was a relief for them. And she actually changed careers to do something more individual versus team-based. And she's so happy. And I was like, this is what I need to do. It came to me, and I need to stand on whatever soapbox I have. And, if women have to talk about women, we can't wait for anyone else to do that for us. We shouldn't. And so like, well, I have an opportunity to spread the word. I'm doing it. Watch, thanks, Grandma, like watch me. And, and it just kept going. And now I see clients across the lifespan. When I started working with the multinational firm, they have you fill out this, tell us about you kind of questionnaire. And I fully expected to get neurodiverse clients. Like, I have ADHD and I've been trying to hide it, and I've moved up to senior manager, and now I feel like I'm going to crash and burn, and that did come. I did get those clients, but I was astonished at the number of Indian women who signed up. And I want someone who understands the culture, someone who gets me, someone where I can take a shortcut and not have to explain like why I have to care about what my mother-in-law said, or, something like that, or without me saying, what? You don't have to care about her. It doesn't matter. It does matter. We want to be culturally sensitive. And if I give you advice in session or a recommendation that doesn't fit with you culturally, you're not going to use it. Number one, you're not coming back, and you're going to feel worse than before you started.
For sure. 100%.
That's not my goal. To put it simply, so on the one hand, there's that universality. On the other hand, there are some nuances and unique needs that each subgroup has. And so, I try to do that dance between diving in deep, into the micro detail and zooming out, to more universal. I did design 2 intensive services, one for ADHD and one for autism, based on, over 20 years of experience. I think people like to be their own special project at times. When I do evaluations and they've got a 20+ page report with graphs and something, then some clients are like, this is like a research paper on me. This is so cool, and they love it. And some are like, I don't care. Just give me it, can I take medicine for this? What's the diagnosis? So you get the range, of course, but I used all of that information and I want to play it to their strengths. And like, if we did a deep dive, what do we eliminate? We eliminate remembering appointments and having to make follow-up. And sometimes their calling and scheduling and all of that is a barrier. And this, we can get it done and get it all booked out and scheduled. We can do deep dives, longer conversations. People can be tangential in their conversations and be somewhat roundabout in their language style. And some of them are aware of that and some are not, and that's fine. And sometimes they say, well, did you get what you needed? I'm like, yes, I will monitor and I will get what I need to help you. But you just go for it. And so we have that luxury of time, and they're more regulated in session because we can relax into the 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is versus ready, set, go. It's like a
Right.
sprint in 50 minutes or less, right?
Yeah, no kidding. A 50-minute appointment is so antiquated.
Yeah.
We've formulated it for insurance purposes and reimbursement purposes from a medical model, but humanistically, like, it just doesn't fit. It's just, again, one of those things that just doesn't fit in the box. And yeah, I'm glad you're offering things like that because it gives people permission to really drop into sessions too, right? Because sometimes in 50-minute sessions, you're like, you spend the first 20 minutes just dancing around whatever's happening for you. And yeah, it's tough. And I'm, as a therapy client, I'm the worst. I'm always looking at the time out of my peripheral. I even told my therapist this week, I was like, so it looks like we're at time. And she was like, oh yeah, we are. So yeah.
Yeah. And so that is a load that you carry and it kind of dilutes the experience, right? So makes it less impactful. So we're intentionally a private pay practice. We're intentionally a hybrid practice. Sometimes clients want to be camera off. Earlier in my career, I was all full-time in person, pre-pandemic. And post-pandemic, I've never looked back. I've stayed virtual, even though I do have an in-person office and I go there periodically as well. But if I changed anything on my shelf or if I move furniture around in my room, that would be enough to dysregulate some clients and would have, quote unquote, wasted the time adjusting to that, And so I have, whether it's in person or virtual, I have the same background and we don't worry about it. Clients are really amazed at the momentum that they get. And going back to my school psychology training, I love being part of a team. I don't need to be the one and only therapist for your entire life. I love dropping in, doing my part, and you can go back to your favorite social worker, the therapist you've had for 10 years. There's a comfort level there. Absolutely. So when I was in Costa Rica recently presenting, that's what I said. Let me do my thing with ADHD and autism. Let's hyper focus on that. Get them some momentum and they can come back to you. There are so many perimenopausal women that, this is their first attempt at therapy. They're like, something's really off. I have to figure this out, and I think a team approach has always been, I've loved working with special ed teachers and speech and language pathologists and OT, PT, you name it, as part of a school psychology team, building team, and a multidisciplinary team at the hospital setting. And I wanted to recreate that at Thrive Collective as well. So my co-founder and I were very intentional about how do we recreate that in a way that helps the family feel safe and supported and not like a push-pull, amongst, because they're really vulnerable. So,
sure.
And that's pretty sacred to me. I want to be very careful with that. So, and respect that.
I love that. Well, it's honestly a great wrap up and transition into that, because I think that sounds like a really intentionally well thought out program. And I know a lot of people are already benefiting from it and will continue to. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's awesome to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. And I have to say, I've been looking at you on screen, but I've also been looking at the Anthony Bourdain. You got to make it to Vietnam. I did go to the restaurant where Obama and Bourdain had a meal.
That's a dream scenario for me.
Yeah.
That's probably a 2026 thing. Just my 25 is booked up, but it's definitely Vietnam and New Zealand were tied neck and neck for like top of my list. I'm going to New Zealand on Tuesday. So top of my list is now Vietnam. But yeah, that painting behind me is actually a charcoal painting from an artist in South Carolina. And he drove it up to my house and brought it over. But I was watching him do charcoal paintings of different Bourdain scenes. And I messaged him and said, could you do this specific scene? He was like, I don't see why not. So yeah, one of my specialties.
It's amazing. It's so well done. And even the facial expression, just everything. So
yeah, it was
really cool. So yeah, we're opposite here. My 26th goal is Australia, New Zealand. So I
Okay.
have
Well,
a daughter's
I
wedding
do
coming.
have that retreat in New Zealand, March of 2026.
Yeah. So we throw a family wedding first. So
Sweet. Cool. Well, tell the audience where they can find more of what you are doing.
absolutely. So Thrive Collective has its fancy website, and handle on Instagram is Thrive Collective Psychology. The coaching practice is called the Thrive Mind, also on Instagram, and the thrivemind.co for the website. So we are ready for you if you are ready for us.
Love that. We'll have that information in the show notes for all of you to have easy access to with all the links. And again, thank you for making the time and coming through jet lag and all the things that have happened. So I appreciate you being on here.
Thank you. I would have been even better at 2 a.m. today, but we are. So thank you so much for the opportunity. And I loved our conversation.
Yeah, likewise. To everyone listening to the All Things Private Practice podcast, new episodes are out on Saturdays on all major platforms and YouTube. You can like, download, subscribe, and share. Doubt yourself. Do it anyway. We'll see you next week.